The Minerals Council of South Africa launched its SA Mining Facts and Figures report. And to take us through the findings and, of course, what they mean for the industry, we are joined by Hugo. Hugo, thank you so much for your time. So it's a report that has, as we say, facts and figures, but take us through the highlights for you.
So I think after severe post-pandemic challenges in 2022 and 2023, the mining industry in South Africa remained under pressure in 2024, although on the production side, we started to see a modest recovery. But some of the other factors continues to tell a sector that's struggling. But I think importantly, 2024 was a year when we think that we started to put the building blocks in place for mining to unlock its full potential in upcoming years.
When we talk of those building blocks, I mean, let's unpack them in terms of, what they are that we have put in place and how quickly we've been able to put those building blocks in place.
So I think the big one is certainly on electricity supply. So before the most recent brief setback in terms of load shedding, we went more than 10 months without any power cuts. And in mining, we talk about load curtailment. So we have not had that for 10 months. So that's a very big change from 12, 18 months ago. But we're still sitting with a cost of electricity problem. So we've sort of dealt with the supply of electricity. That's a very important building block. The second one is we're starting to see some improvement on the logistics side. Transnet's rail volumes, certainly in the second half of 2024, started to pick up, particularly if we think of things like coal, for example. We still have a very long way to run to our ultimate target, but it is positive that those volumes are starting to move in the right direction. So I think those are the two key ones that we can now build on.
I mean, I mentioned that this is the Mining Facts and Figures report, and numbers don't lie. So let's perhaps look it up, say, 5 or maybe over a decade in terms of the data that has come through here to the Minerals Council. What's your sense of the sector over that 10-year period? How have we actually really done?
So I like to say that there's not one mining sector. One actually has to delve into some of the subsectors to really get a sense of what's going on. So on the production side, we continue to see this deep structural decline in gold production. So last 10 years, that has continued to move lower. We're now at a point where we produce less than 100 tons of gold in South Africa. But on the other side, we've seen very strong growth in sectors like manganese and chrome. That sort of feeds into the Chinese story, but those have been success stories. I must just say, otherwise people will get cross at me. Chrome ore has been very successful, but on the ferrochrome side, so on the smelting side, there we've seen decline, and that again is largely electricity constrained sector. The commodity prices have been volatile over this period. And on the employment side, we've sort of stabilized just under 500,000 in terms of employment.
You were talking about the building blocks that we've put in place that have shown, the results that we're currently seeing to give us that improvement that we want to see. Which aspects, when you look at these facts and figures, could we be doing better in?
Well, I mean, certainly on the logistics side. So just the round numbers, Transnet's total rail volumes peaked at 226 million in 2017-18 in that financial year. This financial year that's going to end in March, we're probably going to do around 165 million tons if we are lucky. So that's an improvement from 2 years ago, but it's still way below that 226 million. And the government's ultimate target is to move that to 250 million tons. Now, Transnet has said that they can't do that on their own. This is a national target, and they would need the private sector to help them to reach that target.
From the conversations you're hearing, not just here at the Mining Indaba, but just at the Minerals Council, are you hearing that interest from the private sector to want to get on board and actually assist? Because this seems to be the problem. Yes, you spoke about the costs, but we also need to be able to move the minerals.
No, certainly. And we've seen a private collaboration on things like providing security on some of these lines, purchasing spares on Transnet's behalf. And now we're moving into the big reform where we've now opened it up so that private sector train operating companies can now bid for slots on these commodity corridors to be competing with Transnet. Now that's going to take a bit of time, but again, the framework has now been put in place, and the discussions we're having, there's certainly appetite from the private sector. Perhaps a little bit of tweaks here and there still in terms of the guidelines, but we're certainly on the right path.
I can imagine you go through a lot of facts and figures, not just for South Africa, but you also look at other regions as well in terms of where we stack up. Where are we when we look at South Africa's mining performance versus other counterparts?
I think the one area where we're really struggling is on the exploration side. So we know that exploration is the life or the starting point of the pipeline for future mining activity. And I know you want to come to how we future-proof mining in South Africa. We need more exploration. Just to give you round numbers, I mean, we did around 6 billion rand of exploration activity, going back to 2007, 2006. We're now sitting around 1 billion per year. It's a very, very low number, and it's again, for a sustainable mining production in South Africa going forward, we need to unlock that exploration activity. We have all of these resources underground, but we're not making full use of that.
How do we do that? Is it a case where investors are more interested in other regions? Is it a case where maybe it might not be as easy to convince investors to plow in that much needed capital? What are some of the dynamics playing out there?
There's certainly, if you talk to people from offshore, there remains a perception that people would rather finance sometimes a project in Zambia than in South Africa. It shouldn't be that way. I think it's a perception that's been building for quite some time. We need to change that. I think one way to change that is the imminent implementation of a online mining cadastre system, where, like some of our peer countries in Africa have done already, which would make it much easier for potential explorers to be applying for a permit, as opposed to the current situation where backlogs build up because, to an extent, it's a manual process. It's a real mess, actually. But we're now putting in place a new system to deal with that. So hopefully that could be a bit of a game changer to get more people applying. The process is fast-tracked, and you can then get some of this exploration going.
It's quite interesting. We were having a conversation talking about permitting with an individual who's in that space, and they talk about the same thing. They talk about how having this process fast-tracked and having a system in place would be great. But they also brought in the interest or the topic or the issue around transparency, that when everyone can see how the process is unfolding and where they are and why they didn't get it and why someone else got the permit versus them, it evens out the playing field, so to speak. Do you agree with that it also deals with the issue of transparency?
I think that's 100%. That's 100% right. And also, it gives you, if we do this right, I'm a potential investor. I can go on the system. I can see I have this minerals in this province, and I can also see whether there is an existing mining right on those. So if there is, I don't bother, right, to apply. So again, I think you just fast track the whole process. And what would be ideal is if you have a so-called one-stop shop. So the system takes you through the processes. So I get my permit, then it takes me to the Department of Environment, Water Affairs, I get my water license, so that you don't have to go to different departments. The system takes you through that. Again, we'll have to see, but that is the ultimate where we want to get to.
I love that you brought in the idea of future-proofing the mining industry. What does that look like for you if you had to imagine the future of where, given all the conversations, all the opportunities, what future-proofing the mining industry looks like for you?
So I think one way to think about it is, I've spoken about gold, for example. Gold has really been the bedrock of mining, and I guess to an extent the broader economy in South Africa for many, many years. It's not going to be the same in 10 or 15 years. So I think future-proofing would be, can we unearth other minerals in South Africa to replace gold's contribution over time? And perhaps even coal. We're not talking about tomorrow, but if we think 15, 20 years into the future, coal may not play the same role in our economy or in our mining sector as currently, and gold neither. So that again is why the exploration is so important, so that we can unearth some of the other minerals and build that industry. Copper is a good example. We know historically we mined for copper in the Northern Cape. It's now starting to emerge again, but we need to do more of that. Just very briefly, somebody told me last night, in Botswana, they now produce 100,000 tons of copper in Botswana. Not Zambia, not the DRC. In South Africa, we do 50,000. So Botswana does double the copper production of South Africa. Again, there's lots of opportunity in that sector to do more in South Africa. And that's just one example.
With the Botswana thing, is it also they got the exploration, right? They attracted sort of investors and that interest in that space? Or what was the dynamic when you were talking about the Botswana conversation?
So I think whereas there's this perception in South Africa that things are difficult to get done, I mean, Botswana has the opposite, right? There's a good relationship between De Beers, for example, and the Botswana government. They've had this relationship for many years, and on these annual Fraser Institute rankings, for what it's worth, Botswana tends to rank quite highly. So again, investors think of Botswana, perhaps their environment, a bit different than in South Africa. And again, there's no reason why this should be the case, right? I mean, we should at least be on par with a country like them.
Thank you so much for those insights. To follow the conversation, you can go to miningindaba.com.